in a few minutes. We have, oh. Hi, everybody. This is the October 2021 Alameda Backyard Growers Meeting. We feature today native plants and birds and planting for birds. I've asked everybody if they'd like to please put their favorite California native into the chat box. We had more than 100 people sign up tonight, so it might take us a few minutes to get everybody into the meeting room. So we'll get started probably somewhat time between 7:02 and 7:05. So hang tight and check your chat for what other people's favorite natives are.
Maybe I should go get my laptop.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
Wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. I know what's wrong.
Okay, yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. We're going to start in a few minutes. We have 60 people in, but we had more than 100 people sign up for this. So we're going to wait just a few minutes and see if we can get everybody who wants to be here into the room. In the meantime, please note that you should try and you should mute yourself, and that you should, if you're so moved, you can put your favorite native plant name in the chat. I think it's interesting to see how many different favorites there are. I love that. Right. Do we think, has our participant flow in kind of slowed down at all? Okay, I think maybe we'll get started at least with my introduction, okay? Please mute your microphones. Most of you are already muted. The meeting will be recorded, so if you don't want to be recorded, you should turn off your camera and not comment in the comments. We will take questions through the chat box. You can enter your questions into the chat at any time. And our chat monitor extraordinaire, who is Sarah Miller, will be doing these. Will be handling your questions and giving them off to our speakers. Our tech for this meeting is Birgit Evans. So if you have any technical problems, please chat just to her, and she will try to figure out how to solve your problems. Before we start kind of in the meeting itself, I want to tell you that our next event is an in-person meeting, and we will be having, we will have an in-person brief making workshop at the end of November in Alameda. It will be limited attendance, and you'll need to sign up in advance. So we will put out the sign up link when we're a little bit closer to the time. Now I think, oh, one more thing. If you only want to see the speaker and not everybody else along the side, you can go up to, at least on a computer, it's the right-hand view, and click on view. And that'll get you you can just click on speaker instead of gallery view. So that should help you out. I don't want to see everybody else's names. In the meantime, I'm going to introduce our speakers, who are both awesome people. Eddie Bartley and Noreen Weeden are both active volunteers with the Golden Gate Audubon Society and the California Native Plant Society and the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory. Eddie is the president of the Yerba Buena, I think that's San Francisco, maybe a little San Mateo, chapter of the CNPS, and president of the Farallon Islands Foundation, which focuses on conservation on islands and oceans and provides grants for those for projects in those areas. He is an avian researcher and instructor for the California Academy of Sciences and for Golden Gate Audubon. He also was my first birding teacher. Noreen Weeden was formerly a well-loved, and is still well-loved, but she was formerly the volunteer director of Golden Gate Audubon and is currently a project manager on a habitat restoration project for California, for Golden Gate Audubon. She also is on the board of Yerba Buena CNPS. Both Eddie and Noreen regularly lead natural history field trips, and you can find them, if you're looking for them, outside in one of California's native areas. So I'm going to turn it over to Eddie and Noreen and to tell us all about gardening for birds with California native plants.
Hey everybody, thanks for being here.
And thanks, Linda.
Yeah, thanks for that lovely introduction.
You're very welcome.
And the opportunity to talk about two of our very favorite things, birds and native plants. So California Native Plant Society, many of you know them, a lot of you might already be members. There's a leading plant conservation science nonprofit in California, and their mission is to connect people with California's amazing local plants.
And Golden Gate Audubon has been conserving habitat for birds and connecting people with birds locally for over 100 years. So birds are awesome. They're routinely used as key indicators of environmental conditions. The canary in the coal mine was a real thing. The study about ospreys showed us the problems of DDT in the environment in the 1970s. Turkey vultures are used today to locate gas line leaks. And today, birds are showing us about climate change. Birds are enormously important for biological functions on Earth. They pollinate plants, they eat crop pests like rodents and insects, and they fertilize too. They have important intrinsic, cultural, and even spiritual value. People use bird-inspired phrases like the bluebird of happiness, the dove of peace, someone has eyes like an eagle, and you might even send a tweet. In the US, there are over 46 million people that consider themselves bird watchers, and they spend about $100 billion each year on travel, books, feeders, seed, and more.
They're bird nuts and we love them. What a biologically special place we live here. California has by far the largest biodiversity of any state, with over 6,000 native plant species, and over 30% of them are endemic. They're only here. And the Bay Area is right at the heart of this very special place. In 1988, UNESCO thought enough of it to designate the Bay Area as the Golden Gate Biosphere Reserve. We're in the midsection of the Pacific Flyway here, a major migratory route for birds. And birds take this route north to their breeding grounds each spring and south to their wintering grounds each fall. In February 2013, the Bay was recognized as a wetland of international importance by the Ramsar Convention, an intergovernmental convention on wetlands of international importance. First, let's take a look at what birds need. Your bird-friendly garden can provide essential things birds need and will be especially popular if it's adjacent to an open space or your neighbors help provide the critical mass of these offerings. Just like us, birds need clean water and clean air, a safe place to rest and a place to raise a family in order to thrive. Most birds need to drink water, although some purportedly do not, and they also use it to keep their feathers clean. Plants also provide places for birds to hide and rest. Bird nests are super variable, from simple scrapes to cavities to elaborate stick nests, but almost all songbirds nest in some sort of plant-based structure. This chart shows the amount of energy measured in kilojoules of the various items that birds eat. It also shows the amount of water provided by these food sources. Many birds get most, and a few of them get all of the water they need from their food. Fruit and nectar, as you probably know, are mostly water. Leaves, seeds, grasses, nuts, and insects, they also contain and provide water. Birds, very similar to us, are 60 to 70% water.
It is amazing that most birds eat 25 to 35% of their weight each day. So that phrase about eating like a bird would really be impossible for us.
Let's try.
The fat content in fruit of native plants has been shown to add up to as much as 50% of the berry content. That means it's 10 times more nourishing fat than most non-native ornamental berries. Nuts and seeds like this acorn woodpecker with the acorn provide high amounts of protein and calories for the bird. For even higher metabolisms like that of the hummingbird, nectar is really indispensable. The fourth food group is something we don't necessarily think of as being provided by plants, and that's insects like this western tanager that's eating a pine beetle. 96% of songbirds feed their chicks insects. Even species that mostly consume plants consume some insects. So many birds switch to insects to get extra energy and protein during their breeding season or when they're preparing for their spring or fall migration. In a 2018 study by Science and Nature, they estimated that worldwide, birds eat about 450 million tons of insects, and that's equivalent to 20 quadrillion bugs every year. That's great for us because it means that all that eating is protecting humans and plants. So birds eat many mosquitoes and crop pests. Here we see a downy woodpecker eating a gall wasp larva in an oak tree.
This chart shows that of almost 10,000 bird species, the majority, over 5,000 of these birds eat insects. This is the same worldwide and in North America. Some birds like woodpeckers, flycatchers, vireos, sparrows, and warblers almost exclusively eat insects. A large number are omnivores like the American robin, who primarily eats insects during the nesting season and switches to mostly berries in winter. And baby birds eat a lot. A chickadee pair brings 390 to 570 caterpillars to the nest per day. That was, imagine being the grad student that have to count that. Chestnut-backed chickadees started out very small. Their eggs are like the tip of my small finger. At 2 weeks, each one of these little birds has to grow from the size of a tiny egg to a little bird covered in feathers that can fly out of the nest. That is some quick growing, huh? Chickadees feed their young for 16 days before they fledge. 570 caterpillars for 16 days is over 9,000 caterpillars. Frugivores birds like waxwings and the next most populous, then seed eaters, then nectarivores, as far as in what the diet types go. A bird species is considered a specialist if its preferred food makes up half or more of its diet, like insects, nectar, seed. It is extremely rare for any species to just be in one category. For example, hummingbirds primarily focus on nectar, but also eat insects, especially when they're raising young. A lot of times you'll see them out there dancing around, and flying up, and it looks like they're grabbing something we can't see. They're actually grabbing midges out of the air when they're doing that. Goldfinches eat mostly seed, but they also eat insects when they're raising their young. Unfortunately, for perspective, we have to share some sad news. You probably all heard about the long-term studies showing bird population declines of over 30% since 1970 in North America. Other studies document what is being referred to as the global insect apocalypse, although that's maybe a little bit much, but we got a big problem happening with losing our insects. And despite all these incredible natural features here in the Bay Area, birds and insects are declining here too. Over the past century, our once rich, contiguous landscape of ecologically healthy land full of native plants has been transformed into a lot of developed space with exotic plants and turf grass. 41% of all North American bird species who migrate to Mexico, Central and South America are declining. These issues are related, and there are things that everyone can do to help. More than 10 million acres of land in the US have been converted to developed land from 1982 to 1997. Birds now just have fewer places to raise their young and safely rest and recover during migration. In places like lawns, you can see birds plucking worms out of lawns. They just don't offer enough food or shelter for many bird species. With more than 40 million acres of lawn in the US alone, there's huge potential to support wildlife by replacing lawns, at least some of them, with native plantings. Our mild climate supports plants from many parts of the world, but many of these plants that have been introduced do not contribute to the local ecology in beneficial ways. When new species are introduced, sometimes the locals can adapt over time, but often it throws the ecology into a state of unbalance. If the local species have no defense against introduced species, then they become what is referred to as invasive and can take over areas without providing much in return, sometimes forming vast monocultures. Today, in many landscape parts of the Bay Area, there are very few native plants left. In some areas, people have even traded their gardens for concrete, gravel, and artificial turf.
Remember the food web from biology class? The importance of the relationship of plants to animals, including humans, is largely about insects, particularly the caterpillars and butterflies and moths. Plants are the only organisms that can transform the energy of the sun into food, and insects are the world's primary herbivores, the plant eaters that transform that energy to the rest of the food web and to birds. Native plants and insects co-evolved over millions of years, and our native insects are not adapted to feed on alien plant species, which dominate traditional urban and suburban landscapes. Without native plants, many native insects have nothing to eat, and plants indeed are fundamental. Dr. Doug Talamay and researchers at the University of Delaware conducted a study on the East Coast looking at native plants and the insects they attract. His research was adapted for the plant species that are here on the West Coast. And this chart shows the local native plants and the insect species that are attracted to them. So on the far left, you can see that oak is the highest, followed by hollyleaf cherry, then cottonwood, alder, pine, fir, rose, elderberry, lupin, sagebrush, hazelnut, and beech strawberry. The exotic plants like agapanthus, ice plant, ginkgo, and Mediterranean grasses have almost no value. Not all of these plants are native to all the Bay Area counties, so that's what makes the Bay Area so special. By planting local natives, you can attract the most species of insects, and those insects will in turn attract the most birds. So adding native plants and watch the birds come in. Native plants add interest and beauty to your yard and your neighborhood, and they provide shelter and nesting areas for birds. The nectar, seeds, berries, and insects will sustain the birds and diverse wildlife.
Coevolution is defined as evolution involving a series of reciprocal changes in two or more non-interbreeding populations that have a close ecological relationship and act as agents of natural selection. Our native fauna co-evolved with all the local native flora species in each ecological system. These systems can be amazingly small or quite large. The Bay Area has many. These species each evolved defense mechanisms to survive one another. Primarily, it starts with biochemical battles. Chemical defenses evolved by plants to ward off insects who want to eat them. Cloaking, mimicry, and chemical defenses evolved by those insects to ward off birds, etc., on up the food chain. Our birds, other wildlife, and plants have evolved to this location. These species have been working out balancing acts for millennia, literally since the beginning of life. And in special locations like islands and island-like conditions, specialists often evolve, which creates high levels of endemism. And here in California, where there is very high prevalence of endemism, to some very specific locations.
Our native plants are perfectly adapted to what's often referred to as the Mediterranean climate, but really, shouldn't we be calling it the coastal California climate? Our local climate is characterized by winter rain and summer drought. It's similar to about a dozen other regional climates, but each one includes unique ecologies, so they're completely independent of one another. The planting season in California is late fall and winter here, and that's difficult for a lot of newcomers to our community to adjust to. Since California is relatively young geologically, our soil conditions are super diverse here. So you might see clay, sand, loam, riparian, and a wide variety of rock substrates, all within a not too large of an area. Having all of these microclimates and soil diversities can add some complexity when you're trying to select the best plants for your bird garden. But discovering your unique situation is a lot of fun, and there are some great tools that we'll be sharing with you later in the presentation to help you make those plant selections.
California thrasher is a good example of these co-evolutionary relationships. So if you look at a range map of California thrasher, it's almost identical to that of the California coffeeberry. There are many similar examples here. Alameda County has at least 360 native plants. About half are considered drought tolerant. Of course, all of them present have tolerated everything to date, or they wouldn't be present, right? So they've already been through all the changes that have occurred so far, and they're still here.
Over 400 bird species have been documented in Alameda County, and those mostly rely on insects, like we talked about earlier, and those insects rely primarily on the native plants. These are some of the birds that you might see. And as we saw before, most birds eat insects, so the plants that are host plants for insects will attract the most bird species to your backyard or open space. Here we see a finch enjoying a justly hatched termite. Good news.
Yay for finches. Caterpillars are wonderful packets of yummy protein and calories, or so I've heard. Most songbirds and other bird families depend on caterpillars to feed their super fast growing young. Here's some information that we've gotten from the National Wildlife Foundation Native Plant Finder. And it shows the number of caterpillars that have that are hosted by the types of plants. And thanks to Susan Karasoff for loaning us this nice slide.
Flowers are nectar power. We have a huge selection of locally native wildflowers and flowering shrubs to choose from. Plant these and you can attract beautiful orioles, hummingbirds, and native bees. The photo on the right is an Anna's hummingbird at a bee plant. There are over 20,000 scientifically described bee species in the world, and 8 of them are in the honeybee species, all in the genus Apis, and all native to Eurasia. They by far receive the most attention in the press. However, there are more than 4,000 bee species native to the United States. About 1,600 native bees live in California, and 150 native bee species in San Francisco, according to San Francisco State University instructor Gretchen LeBune. I think there's also been a study done in Berkeley, but none for all of Alameda County. So I was trying to find that number, but I couldn't quite get there. But somewhere, you know, over 100, I'm sure.
Any grad students out there? There's a hint. Fruiting plants like toyon, coffeeberry, and elderberry are all local keystone plant species, super valuable to migrant and overwintering birds. And they're lovely to look at too. With their deep roots, native perennial bunch grasses not only offer exceptional carbon sequestration, but also draw seed-eating birds like house finch and fox sparrow looking for these high-calorie snacks.
As gardeners, you know, diversity adds interest, and it can also add birds. You'll see birds feeding on lawns, but they support only a few species. Lawns typically require fertilizer, high amounts of irrigation, and maintenance involving air and noise pollution. Instead, choose from some native grasses and ground covers and wildflowers. Colorful wildflowers mostly require sunny locations.
Drought-tolerant native wildflowers like California Aster can really add splash to an open area in late summer. There are really a lot of native wildflowers that do well in these situations. A selection of different types of native ferns like Western sword, which is a very drought-tolerant fern, or polypody fern, blue pine, vine maple, or yerba buena mint add a lot of visual interest to a garden. Most of us love the look of natural landscaping in our yards. Flagstones, boulders, stones, and river pebbles can really add a lot of pleasing nature aesthetic. Unfortunately, a few of these products are sourced from fragile or distant ecologies where environmental considerations may be lax. I know we put a bunch of river pebbles, not a bunch, but a few sacks of it in there. And then when I started looking, it was like, oh, the area that came from in Mexico is actually not doing that well now because of all of the mining of that very pebble. So, you know, we got it now, but I sort of regretted it a little bit later on. Anyway, we recommend considering environmental impacts when shopping for hardscape products. I mean, you probably already have, you know, stuff sitting around. Increasingly popular is the repurposing of felled trees, reusing rocks from the immediate area, minimize mining while saving dollars too. A trip to a building salvage store may be just a ticket and add an interesting story. Varying heights are important. In many areas, how tall a plant will grow, impacts to retaining walls, and possible impacts on neighbors all need to be considered. If you have room, we have so many hardy and wildlife beneficial trees and arboreal shrubs to choose from giant oaks to the more diminutive ceanothus and elderberries. Oak, toyon, ceanothus, red elderberry are some of the wonderful native plants to choose from.
You might want to consider where you want to plant. Is it windy or foggy, full sun or shady? Do you have clay soil or a combination of soils? Is there a nearby creek or other fresh water? Remember, leaf litter is okay. Many insects lay their eggs there, so you do want to keep that. a small brush pile in the winter, maybe not during the fire season, but brush piles are attractive to birds, particularly wrens and quail. Spider webs are important to hummingbirds. And you might consider setting a goal for yourself of having, say, 75% native plants. This is a pink flowering currant. It's a photo from our backyard last January or February. These bright blooms appear in winter, so you can enjoy seeing the pink flowers and hummingbirds feeding on the nectar.
One of the things we often suggest when people ask what the plant is, if you have a nearby open space that you really like, you can go there and learn the plants that are in that open space and that ecology, and they're probably ones that will also do well in your garden.
With local natives, you can plan for a variety of colors or plan for something to be in bloom during each season. We have something blooming in our tiny garden every month of the year.
Right now, we've got California Fuchsia. There's still a few Clarkia that are surprisingly lasting. I don't know why, since we don't give them much water, but it's kind of fun. You can, that was one of our goals when we started out, is just like, okay, we want some color all year. And we've been pretty lucky with it. Water is vital, as we talked about before, to most birds, and they really like running water. Obviously, not many people have a stream in their backyard, but it really doesn't take very much. A water feature, especially if the water is low and moving. The sound of moving water is a for sure bird magnet, and it helps deter mosquitoes too. So there's quite a few. We just kind of use these little shallow water baths, kind of the bottoms of these floral trays, and put some pebbles in there and put just maybe like an inch of water. And you know, we put in some round rocks so the birds, so there's different depths, and then just kind of change it every couple of days with some leftover water. But songbirds usually like it 1 to 2 inches. Larger birds, of course, will get in and bathe in deeper water. We place it near a bush or other vegetation so that birds can dry or hide in case a hawk or other predator approaches. You'll see the birds kind of sneaking in, dropping from branch to branch, getting closer and closer, and then going down and drinking or bathing. We do recommend you place it 15 foot or more from glass doors or large windows to prevent collisions. Because if something scares them, if it's too close to the windows, they may fly in and have an unintended consequence there. So, and be sure to replace the water frequently, not only to deter mosquitoes, but also just to keep it freshened up for the birds.
Hey, Eddie.
Yes.
Would you mind expanding on what you all have planted for winter blooming in your garden?
Yeah, so we've got, we have some wildflowers. The fuchsia will last until about October or November. Mm-hmm. And then we have, you know, the poppies will start popping.
Once the rain starts.
Yeah, once the rain starts. So we'll have poppies start popping back up in. And we never know. Sometimes the asters, because we have a lot of shade in our yard, and so we get like delayed blossoms. The things will blossom later, but they'll also last longer into the season. And then starting January, our ribes will start blossoming again. So just about the time all the toyon berries have fallen, the ribes will start, and usually by late January, and then February, March, April, then that's ablaze.
Awesome. Can you also expand at all on if there are any, or if there's any California natives that either like or really dislike sandy soil. That's a lot of what we're working with here in Alameda.
Yes, in fact, there's quite a bit of, there's a big difference between plants that'll do well in sand and ones that won't. And so, I mean, it's kind of a long list. So it depends on if you're talking about trees or flowers. Like for example, wax myrtle do very well as a tree in sand. Some will tolerate both, like oak. You can grow it in sand, but it might be a little more stunted.
Lupins do
Lupins, well. Right. You know, if you come to over to the city, you can go. The Presidio has a lot of really beautiful plants that that do well in sand, of course, because they're in the dunes, like over by Chrissy Lagoon or Land's End. You can get a really nice sample, but you know there's probably about 100 plants that do quite well that love sand. And in fact,
beach strawberry is a great ground cover.
Right. Sea thrift, armeria is a beautiful one that has large pink flowers. Seaside daisy, aerial phylum or lizard tail. It's sort of like the list goes on, but we're going to show you how to find out by using some of the online tools that we've got lined up to show you.
Awesome. And maybe one more before you go back.
Sure.
Native grasses that have dried and browned from the summer come back?
Yeah. Yes, they do.
Yes.
Yes, they. I mean, some people really like the look of the, native grasses frequently are in tufts, and they're in bunches, and so that can look really beautiful blowing in the wind. The purple needle grass is our state grass, and that does well pretty much in a large area of the state. So there are a lot of different size grasses. Some of the fescues are smaller. Anyway, a variety to choose from there as well.
Yeah, a lot of landscape designers are discovering them, and some grasses can work in kind of deep planter situations too.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure.
So these are some other tips to help with birds and insect pollinators. We already mentioned some of them, but you can let the flower heads dry out for birds, and they'll eat the seed. And remember, some bare ground is good. There are many native bees that are ground nesters. So you don't want to have mulch everywhere.
Few things are more rewarding than having native birds nest in your yard. I mean, it's people, you'll see photographs on Instagram and Nextdoor and lots of social media about people excited about it. Birds finding a bird nest in their garden. Hummingbirds use spider web and lichen materials, really fine materials. So we recommend kind of, we swear to keep a messy garden, if you will. We don't clean out all of the spider webs and such. We kind of let them go, and eventually the rain will take care of them anyway when we get it. And you can create conditions conducive to bird nesting with native plants. Nests may be constructed with woven twigs, grasses, lichen, and other plant materials. So a lot of times we'll take our cuttings and, when we're just trying to make it look a little nicer in an area, and then we have kind of little discard areas. And so birds may use those a little bit later on. Some trees are much more conducive to nest cavities than others, oaks, for example. Woodpeckers are great. Woodpeckers are the home builders of the world, of the bird world. And many of the other birds like chickadees and bluebirds and stuff like that, they rely a lot on woodpeckers being present so that because they're secondary nesters. So woodpeckers, especially in our area, downy woodpeckers, haries, the flickers, when they're around, that's a good thing. And they'll make, they might make a hole in the tree, but it usually doesn't kill it. Sometimes they'll pick on dead trees, but it's really a good sign when woodpeckers are around.
So along with trees, many songbirds nest in dense shrubbery out of sight. And this is an example of a bush lupin, sparrows, and like white-crowned sparrows and juncos might nest in dense shrubbery like that.
So cavities are in short supply because people tend to cut dead trees. But if you can, you know, and you got the space for it, it's kind of good to leave a dead tree, and you'll see a lot of animals using that. But you can supplement with appropriately selected and placed nest boxes. Oops.
Yep.
Birds will often try to nest in human-built situations, and if you can, let them. They usually don't take very long to fledge. And if you're patient and you can enjoy watching them raise their young and just clean up after they leave.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about home hazards. Unfortunately, outdoor cats kill over 2.4 billion birds in the United States every year. If you must let your cat out, then install a catio or train your cat to walk on a leash. Golden Gate Audubon has a new program with a discount to purchase a catio. So check into it. Pesticides are also a problem, and more than 1 billion pounds of pesticides are applied in the United States each year. The most widely used insecticides are called neonicotinoids or neonics, and they're lethal to birds and to the insects that birds consume. Pesticides kill the insects, which birds eat, and also are contributing to the monarch and other butterfly decline. So be okay with the insects. Anyway, another issue is rat poison. It also unintentionally kills other predators. So when a hawk or an owl eats a poison rodent, it dies. Or if it feeds it to its young, then the whole, all the young die. So instead, remove food sources in your backyard, seal access points, and use appropriately sized snap traps instead of rodenticide. And if you have a need for outdoor lighting, use a motion detector. And have the light pointed downward to where it's needed. This will provide you security and illumination where you need it, and also save you money. And if you can, get a yellow LED. Those are bright enough for us for illumination purposes, and it's less, it won't draw birds. The harsher white blue light is a problem for birds. It can attract them, especially when it's a foggy night and there's sky glow.
So we were going to go over a few plants you'll find using the super helpful Cowscape Garden Planner, which uses your zip code to suggest plants that should work in your neck of the woods. Oaks throughout the lower 48 are keystone species, and the East Bay has a wonderful diversity of them. why they called it Oakland, of course. You know, it used to have a fabulous oak woodland there. Most of it, of course, has been developed, but there's still, you know, lots of, especially on the hills. Non-deciduous live oak species present in the East Bay includes the coastal, interior, canyon live oak, and the rare Palmer oak. Deciduous oaks in the East Bay include black, blue, and the tallest of California's 20 oak species, the stately valley oak. Oaks are central to many birds' lives, and some species will not be present without them.
And their acorns are appearing now.
Another wildlife super beneficial tree is the California Buckeye. It has low water requirements, yet many of the large flowers, it has many large flowers in the spring. It's completely deciduous. So gorgeous winter leafless form allows sunlight into the understory. It attracts nectivorous and insect-loving birds and is a host plant for many butterflies and moths, including the fabulous California sister. Maples everywhere they occur are bird magnets. Our California bigleaf maple is very fast growing, typically tops out at 50 to 60 feet, but can reach 100 foot, too large for many residential gardens. But if you have the room, it's a real winner. It produces beautiful fall colors where temperatures become cold enough and is winter deciduous. It's native to Western North America, mostly near the Pacific coast, from southernmost Alaska south to Southern California. Some stands are also found inland in the foothills in the Sierra Nevada mountains. And a tiny population occurs all the way in central Idaho for some reason. Has the large palmate leaves typical of maples. Really an outstanding plant. You can have a space for it. The toyon is probably my favorite of all of the native plants in our yard. And it's because all year round it has something interesting going on, and it's really, birds are in it every day. They're either eating insects or in the spring, the flowers, that has very large flower bonnets, and which are which are white. And then in the fall, just as we're getting berries right now, I just noticed they started out green and then they turn red. And it is quite the thrush magnet in probably like November around Thanksgiving and on in through December. We'll get cedar waxwings, hermit thrush, and of course, American robins. It's really useful as a bank stabilizing plant and works well for hedges too. Really easy to grow, requires very little water, is deer resistant. Anyway, great nectar source in spring and a real thrush and waxwing magnet in the fall.
In the wild, the local dogwood, it commonly grows in wetland edges and along small creeks and streams. It's a medium to tall deciduous shrub, and it grows 1.5 to 4 meters tall, that is, and it grows underground by stolons, and it can form into dense thickets. It's generally easy to grow. We have a couple in our backyard, and we contain them in 15-gallon pots. So they're in a shaded area, and they can be propagated by cuttings. The fruit is a globe-like berry, and birds love to eat it. It's a white color, and it has white flowers that are also appear whenever there's a lot of water. So it changes over time. It's got branches and twigs that are dark red with a green leaf, and that leaf turns to a bright red or purple in the fall. So it's a interesting plant to have. And one of our most common and hardy shrubs in coastal scrub and upland parts of California are the Coyote Bush. It's underrated, and it's a drought-resistant plant. It co-associates with 400 species of insects and animals. So it's an amazing plant. It's attractive to flycatchers, sparrows, finches, mockingbirds, thrashers, waxwings, vireos, grosbeaks, jays, warblers, chickadees, and titmice. And it's a really interesting plant in that the male has a yellow flower and the female has a white flower. Right now, it is in bloom, so you might see that at least in the city. We're seeing it in bloom. And there is a low growing form. So if you don't want the big bushy coyote bush, you can get a low growing version. It's more common on the coast.
Everybody loves it.
Another low water use shrub is the twinberry. And hummingbirds and songbirds and butterflies and bees really love this plant. It blooms in the winter with pink flowers, and this is the fruit. Ceanothus or blue brush is one of the fragrant species in the genus Ceanothus. They show off their really beautiful blossoms from early spring through early fall, and they can be trimmed up to look like a tree, a small tree, that is. And one of the interesting features, the Native Americans used it for a soap. You can put some water, take the blossoms and add some water, rub it in your hands, and you'll get some bubbles. So it's a fun plant to show kids or others. But chickadees and titmice and a variety of sparrows and woodpeckers associate with the Ceanothus.
And it smells very nice too.
Right.
Lizard tail, this is Areophyllum. This is one of the plants that will grow very well in sandy conditions, and blooms, has beautiful blossoms in the summertime. Also, obviously, bees and moths love this plant. Checker bloom, Soldacia malviflora. It's a common native perennial herb in the mallow family. It grows well here. Tends to grow in dry, open flats as a ground cover. Has bright green leaves and 1 inch deep pink flowers. Does well along the edge of paths. Tolerates a wide variety of soils, prefers damp winter conditions and dry summer conditions. So it's not a herbaceous flower that you want to water a lot in the summer.
So is this a shrub that would do well in gravel or scree, perhaps?
It would. I mean, it needs soil, but it'll creep up over the edge of the gravel. So I would use it along paths, gravel, or rock or decomposed granite paths. It'll work really well like that.
Awesome. Do you have other suggestions of plants that would do well in gravel or scree?
Yes. A lot of the buckwheat, our buckwheat just will. We've got some like gravel-like areas, and we have to pull it out of there because it's constantly like trying to get in there. So, and then you're just walking on it, which is okay too, but it seems like so that'll do well. And what else? We've got monkey flower that likes to grow that way. Also, hummingbird sage. That'll creep in there. California aster. So quite a few of them will if they give them a little bit of soil, and poppy, of course, will just like, all it needs is a crack in the sidewalk sometimes, and it's happy.
We have a question about California buckeyes possibly being poisonous. The question is asking whether that is poisonous to insects or perhaps to bees from the pollen.
There may be some chemical defense going on there, but the native butterflies and bees love them, love, love, love. They're like, there's all these butterflies that really depend and that's their host plant for quite a few butterfly species. So is it poisonous to mammals? I don't remember that, honestly. I'd have to look that one up.
Fair. Thank you.
So this is a common yarrow, and in Spanish-speaking areas, it's called plumajillo, or little feather, for the shape of the leaves. During the gold rush era, it was used to stop the flow of blood from wounds. The Native Americans had a lot of uses for the plant, medicinal-wise. It was used for pain relief, fever reduction, and blood issues of all kinds. It flowers May through June, and it does really well in disturbed areas. It's really a frequent part of a lot of butterfly and bird gardens. It's a really easy plant to grow. I highly recommend it.
We've had to weed it out of our yard sometimes because I mean, which is no big deal. You just pull it, you know, but it's quite easy to get established.
So this is one of the resources that we mentioned earlier. It's called CalScape. And if you look at the top left, that is the garden planner tool. And it is zip code based. So you enter in your zip code, and then it will ask you a series of questions, not too many, but you can select from an elegant style garden, homeowner association, outdoor living spaces, or California natural spaces. And it lets you develop this list that you can take with you out to the nursery, or you can also choose plants based on your sun or shade, or how much water is available at your space. This is an example on the right-hand side, which shows one of the plants that it pulled up for Alameda, the California Aster. And this is the type of information that it provides. It's very low water use. It has a pink, purple, and white flower, and it grows 1 to 6 feet, and by 0.7 to 3.3 feet. So it can get quite big.
I've never seen it get 6 foot though. I've never seen it more than about 2.5 or 3 foot. That would be quite the monster Aster at 6 foot, I think. But they say somebody must have measured that.
Right. And then this is another resource from National Audubon. And this is a tool that you can find on the audubon.org Plants for Birds website. And it is also zip code based. And the plant and bird species associations are provided. And it also does provide some local nursery information. So this is one of the plants that came up for Alameda County. It's black sage, and it said it would grow well under oaks and has a lovely aroma.
Yeah, if you're want an aromatic garden, this, and maybe some California sage and some yerba buena, and you got some really nice smelling plants for your friends to check out.
And just so everyone knows, if they're not following the chat, these links are all dropped in, so y'all can click on it from there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you for doing that, Sarah.
Thank you.
Of course.
And then these are some book resources that we refer to. Doug Talamay has written several books. He's done a lot of research, and worked with university students and grad students. And he's been calling people to action to plant local native keystone plants, to plant a variety of these plants, and plant for specialist pollinators and caterpillars, and create places for the caterpillars to pupate in native leaf litter below native trees. And he also encourages people to talk with their neighbors about creating a larger space, you know, so it's not just your yard, it's your community. And also he talks about removing invasive species. One thing I didn't mention earlier is that there are 3,300 invasive species in North America, and they can really decimate the local species diversity. So, you know, join in one of the local parks and participate in some habitat restoration.
Here's a couple of our go-to books in our library, just as far as designing California native gardens, and also the plants of the San Francisco Bay region. Really great plant for a book to just to kind of dream about which plants would work in your yard, and
ideas.
and ideas for them. Yeah.
So Golden Gate Audubon and the Yarrow chapter of CNPS have partnered on a Plants for Birds program locally. And we have this QR code where you can get more information about the Plants for Birds. This year, the program is in the East Bay. And so if you click on that QR code, it'll bring up those list of plants that were selected. We're working together on 4 plants per year, and we're what we're calling cross-pollinating. So informing the bird people more about plants and informing the plant people more about birds, and helping to expand this program each year so that people can grow their gardens and learn more about both plants and birds, and have a beneficial impact on our biodiversity.
And the way most smartphones, you can just take a photograph of that, you know, put your camera up to that QR code in your with your camera, your phone camera, and it'll lock on that and bring up the URL, which will take you to these brochures that we're showing.
They're also available on the both organizations' websites, but might be a little hard to find, but it is in both locations. And this year, information on Plants for Birds is also available in Spanish. We have a volunteer that has helped in doing the translations. And also new this year is a 12-page guide designed by volunteers, and it includes really beautiful graphics by an artist, a graphic design artist, Eliza Lubetkin, and the Spanish language translation by Victoria Vargas. Again, that's also available on Golden Gate Audubon and Yarrow websites. And these are the nurseries that are participating in the Plants for Birds program. So on the left-hand side are nurseries in San Francisco, and on the right-hand side are nurseries that are participating in the East Bay.
If you're interested in attracting these or other local butterflies, check out this resource on our website, and there's a link there. But our volunteers and our board have been working on these attractive brochures, and there's a really some strong information from Peter Caldwell too, as far as in plant butterfly associations. That's available on that same page.
And you can check both Golden Gate Audubon and Yerba Buena CNPS websites for upcoming events. In the spring, the Bringing Back the Natives tour will have a variety of information about plants for birds as well.
And here are some simple ways to become involved. Of course, we're advocating for you supporting the local plants and local, which will support the local animals in your neighborhood, and just by planting native plants. You'll plant them and they will come, as they say. And please, if you're not already a member of Golden Gate Audubon or California Native Plant Society, we'd love to have you as members.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, really appreciate you all taking the time out from your evening. And
we're open to questions if you have any.
Awesome. Yeah. I have a couple. Regarding any nesting boxes, can you tell us about any directional requirements that there are or might be for certain species of bird?
Sure. There's, well, each species, it has a lot to do with not only the size of the box, but also the size of the hole. And it can be very specific. You don't want for, you know, larger birds to be able to get into the holes of where smaller birds go. They're very specific about, they're quite picky about choosing their hole size, as you can imagine. And so there's a lot of great information. It didn't used to be in the old days when we were making, you know, making a lot of boxes 15 and 20 years ago. We were kind of having to search around a little bit for the resources, but now there's many really great resources online, from barn owl boxes to kestrel boxes to chickadees, bluebirds, for example. I credit the efforts of you know, a few dozen, maybe 100 people that really got into making bluebird boxes for the bluebird renaissance that has happened in California. And Western bluebirds have probably, their population may have doubled, especially in urban areas, because of people using bluebird boxes. And mostly these boxes are, again, they're replacing a lot of the, you know, and what would have been, you know, dead trees that people, you know, are just naturally cut either for safety or firewood or just because they don't think it looks very good. But it can be very helpful. But you also want to know placement. Mm-hmm. Placement is key. And each one of them has, you know, people have experimented around quite a lot, and you can go and see, you know, and learn online, like what strategies people are using for specific species.
But you probably want to see what's in your area and then try to focus on one of them, you know, something that's already there, and start with that. Like say chickadee, they have a very small nest box and a very small entry home, and it can be really fun to see them.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so just to reiterate, you're saying that every bird has a different, not only size of habitat, but a hole that they want to enter their habitat in, and a different directional placement where the hole is facing north or facing south or
facing a field, or or hidden in a, you know, in a dense area. So
they're not quite all that picky. Like I've seen bluebirds and tree swallows swap nest boxes for years in some locations, and then all of a sudden a house wren will take over. So, you know, similar sized birds will use similar size nest, and it's also important to clean them. if you are able to clean it. Otherwise, some of them will just keep stacking up until they're completely filled.
Wow.
You know.
Okay.
But they can be built in such a manner that it's very easy. Once all the birds have fledged and moved on or migrated, then you can open it up, clean it out, let it dry out, and then it'll be ready for the next breeding season.
Right. Can you tell me if there is any negative, I'm changing topics a little bit here, any negative impact from crows in our area on the population of songbirds?
I would say yes.
Corbett.
Can you expand?
A lot of crows and ravens populations have noticeably expanded, and they're showing up in areas that they haven't been before. Like there were no ravens in San Francisco until the 1970s, for example, after an absence of at least 70 or 80 years. And then and they're pretty hard on songbirds, so they're definitely having a negative impact on our other songbird populations because of nest predation. Now, why are they adapting, or is it because of access to landfills and maybe trash cans and human food? Probably yes to all of that. It's hard to really pin it down, but we do know that they've done really fantastically well, and they also predate on songbirds quite a lot. So.
Gotcha. Okay, Eddie and Noreen, I'm like, this is not my question, but I do know who asked it. And they are wondering if there are any owl species that are native to the East Bay that can, that their presence can be encouraged to eradicate probably an urban rat problem, or gophers, whatever.
Absolutely. If the rats are there, the owls will probably show up. There
are several different things to consider though. One thing is barn owls would be something that you could encourage, but great horned owls and barn owls are kind of like enemies. They don't like each other. Or the great horned owl does not like the barn owl, and it is the top predator. So if there's a great horn in the area, then leave the great horn. But if you don't know of any owl species in the area, then you can encourage barn owls by putting up a barn owl nest box. And those nest boxes are like 12 to 15 feet high, and have you can have them on a post that can be lowered so that it can be cleaned annually. And they do a great job on rodents.
The only thing is that the word's gotten out pretty well, but it can be gotten out further, is that rodenticides kill owls and other hawks. And we mentioned that earlier, but it's still happening a lot, so when studies are done on on owls and raptors, they're finding a lot of rodenticide in their bloodstream. And so it's kind of an ongoing problem. And so we understand people want to get rid of mice and rats, and it seems like putting poison out's a good idea. But if your neighbor is poisoning rodents, there's no sense in putting up an owl box, to attract barn owls. It's just they're not going to make it, because those rodents get poisoned. They stagger around. The owl's like, whoa, there's an easy catch. And then next thing you know, they're poisoned themselves. So anyway, typically you know, suggest people go out and actually ask their neighbors and try and get a local community effort. Yeah.
Awesome. That's a great suggestion. I think the last question I have for you before I hand it over to Linda is that Marla mentioned that she had bought some heavenly bamboo plants for their berries, thinking they would be great for birds, but then discovered that they're poisonous to birds and they need to go out and clip off the berries. Can you confirm that and have any thoughts on that about how
heavenly bamboo?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not familiar with the species, but I would not doubt that. You know, that as we were talking earlier, a lot of plants will build up these chemical defenses, and typically local species will also, they'll become, you know, either become immune to that defense, you know, but if you take some species that's from far away and then bring it to another area, these animals do not have defenses of that, and so they eat it and they die, you know, whereas there's some you know, insect or something that can tolerate it in its local area. So that's the whole co-evolutionary theory about how moving plants around kind of disrupts these normal balancing acts.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you so much, Sarah. You were great. And I just want to thank Eddie and Noreen tremendously, because I learned so much. I mean, I kind of thought I knew about native plants, but no, I learned a lot, and I learned a lot about birds too. So thanks hugely to you and to both of you.
Thank you for having us again.
And to Sarah and Birgit for assisting me, and to everybody who attended. Thank you for coming and listening to our talk. And I hope to see you in the native plant nurseries. I need to unrecord this. Trying to turn it off.
Did you find the record button?
No, no, my mouse has died again.
Okay, I'll stop recording.
Thank you.